concepts. What are you going to measure? And what does a wage labor mean in the Japanese context, or in the Indian context, or in the African context? How can we compare wage labor in different societies? What are the terms used in different languages for that? The same applies to slave. What does slavery mean in one society and in another society? Are we talking about the same kind of slavery, or should we use more differentiated concepts? So, in order to do this, you have to have the kind of conceptual discussions as a starting point, and then you can start to try to measure at least the changes in the labor status of different parts of the world. So this is in a way, a more ambitious kind of collaboratory that the International Institute is working on. Let me skip this example, which is about real wages and prices, and go on to the last example of a collaboratory that is working at the moment. Global inequality is the big theme, in a way, I think we should be working on. So one of the things we have to know, how big is global inequality? How big was it in the past, and how has it evolved? And there is a data set which more or less tries to measure this by Bourguignon and Morisot, but it's not really reliable in the sense that whenever they have no observations, they assume that inequality did not change in a country. So for large parts of the world, they only have observations for after 1950, so they assume that inequality within large parts of the world remained the same between 1800 and 1950, which is a big assumption. So this collaboratory is trying to collect all the available data on inequality, income inequality, but also height inequality is used as a kind of indirect proxy, and pool the data from all different sources, and to get one picture of global inequality. Well, that's the picture. This is how global inequality, according to our preliminary estimates, has developed between 1820 and 1995. On this axis, you find the average income of the persons involved. And on the other axis, it's the population, the size of the population in the different income groups in the different periods. So you can see initially there is a kind of homogeneous distribution. This is 1820, the first. Small population, homogeneous to some extent, distribution of income. You see it growing, the population growth, and well, there is a movement towards the right, because in certain parts of the world people are doing better than in other parts of the world. And at some point you also see that the unimodal distribution becomes a bimodal distribution, especially after the yellow one, after the Second World War, this becomes very marked. So the world falls apart into two groups in a way. So a real polarization of income levels. And then the striking thing is that after 1980, the pattern seems to merge again into one unimodal distribution. So mainly as a result of the rise of India and China, this pattern of two peaks in the distribution disappears, and we now have a unimodal distribution again. I think that's a fascinating story. I'm sure if you agree, but I think that and which should be analyzed more fully, and that we should try to understand what is behind those changes. Yes, I'm making progress, I think. This is one of the other things you can do with this data, analyze which share of the inequality is based on within country inequality, which is based on between country inequality, and you can see immediately that the between country inequality is increasing very rapidly. It was very small initially in 1820, and it's big. It's much bigger than within country inequality at the moment, which is not a big surprise perhaps, but still we can now more adequately probably measure these kinds of changes. And another thing which is striking is that you find regional differences in average income inequality. So the world is now in each period set at 100. And you see, for example, that Latin America is consistently above this average level of inequality. there's a story of persistent inequality there, and North America used to be, during part of the story, as part of the period, quite low and is now above the average level. Western Europe had its own development trajectory. Okay, so this is all trying to tell stories about global inequality on a global scale on the basis of these data sets. The aim of the project that's mentioned here, Clio Infra, is to coordinate this kind of teamwork of people trying to work with those collaboratory environments. There's software which is very good for that, and to discuss how this can be done, to learn from experiences that we have had in the past, and also to visualize these data. There are two very nice websites on the internet, especially Gapminder is brilliant in order to visualize processes of economic change in the world economy, and to illustrate how big this is. A foundation, a Swedish foundation, which is doing this because they like to do it. And they have about 1 million visitors per year. So it shows you something about the public demand for knowledge about global inequality. What they do is to visualize patterns of global inequality in the world economy and show the historical dimensions of that. StatPlanet is doing this in another way. It's a UNESCO project. They show it on maps, but that's also a very nice possibility. Now the difficult problem. So if you agree with me that we should cooperate in order to do global economic history in the best of all possible ways, then the question is, can we cooperate? If you look at the past, and historians tend to look at the past in order to learn what will happen in the future, then you see if a way to measure this. You may have noticed already that I like to measure things. A way to measure this is to look at the average number of authors per paper in a journal. It shows you that if are people cooperating, or are all papers written by single authors. In the history journals, this is Rick Steckel has collected this kind of information. He has a paper which cites this. In most of the history journals, there is a solid one, and then a number of zeros, and then another digit. So historians, on average, find it difficult to work together, and there is also no change in this. So if you look at 1975 and 2000, it's a flat series. Among economic historians, it's almost flat, but there are some fluctuations which, if you would test it very carefully, you might find an upward trend. I'm not sure if it would really be very, but in the Journal of Economic History, it goes from 1.2 to about 1.4. But there are, sometimes it falls back again, so it's not very strong. Among the sciences, it goes from 2 to 3 in 1975 to 4 to 10. It depends a bit on which journal you look at in 2000. So they have learned to cooperate. And they know how to do this, and they manage this well. And I wonder why we are unable to do that. And I would be very much in favor of experimenting more with this kind of institutions to learn how to do this. I think perhaps we should also train, or try to train our students to work together in teams. And because we lack the tradition, and there are a lot of problems with that. For exogenous reasons, I always end up as the et al. in the team, and more the al than the et. That is but perhaps therefore I'm a very good candidate to work with. I have been thinking about. But there is a problem there. You really disappear as an author if you have my surname. So there's something to work on. That we, change my surname. Yeah, I should think about it. But okay, so there are things that we have to think about how to make it possible for us to work together. Teamwork is required, and we can learn a lot from the birds, which is my conclusion that they know how to work together if the thing they want to achieve is impossible to achieve on their own. Thank you very much.